Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to join. We'll just be a minute or two. Welcome, welcome everyone. Just waiting for everyone to join. Just waiting for just a few more people to pop in. Good morning, everyone. People still trickling in, but maybe we'll make a start in a moment.
All right, good morning, everyone. I think we might make a start. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar on planning a Victorian Law Week activity. My name's Lisa Pryles and I'm the Education and Events Director at the Victoria Law Foundation. Victoria Law Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country, wherever you may be joining us. The offices of the Victoria Law Foundation sit on Wurundjeri land, and we pay respect to their elders and to all the generations of Wurundjeri and other First Nations people, and acknowledge that the lands were never ceded. We recognise the impact of colonisation, its legacy of injustice, and the marginalisation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And we believe that acknowledging the past is an essential step in building a better, more equitable future. Victoria Law Foundation aims to break down the barriers to justice for all Victorians through our work, and we are genuinely committed to making a contribution to a better justice system for all of us, especially those vulnerable and in the most need. Now, I wanted to start today by introducing the Victorian Law Week team to all of you. With us today, we have Helen Papadimitriou, our events coordinator, Matt Hurst, our communications manager, Jackie Matthews, our communications coordinator, and Mel Rigel, our grants manager. And rounding off our team, but not on screen today, is Mick Pascos, our Victorian Law Week publicist. Now, we have a packed program for you today, so unfortunately we won't have time to take questions during the webinar, but please get in touch with us afterwards if you'd like to ask us anything. We'll have our contact details on the final slide today. So today we will be covering a bit of an overview about Victorian Law Week, what it is, how it works, what support's available to event organisers and some key dates. We'll give you some information about the grants that are available for event organisers. We'll also talk through some of the things you should keep in mind when planning your Victorian Law Week activity, starting with our updated event criteria. We'll also provide an update for people interested in offering free legal consultation. We'll look at why it's important to have a clear purpose for your event or activity and how you identify or articulate that purpose. We'll look at why it's important to have a clearly defined target audience and how to take your target audience into account when planning your event. And finally, we'll cover some of the things to think about when deciding whether to run an online or an in-person event. We will be running another session in April about effectively marketing your event, so please keep an eye out for our emails with details about that session. Okay, so now what is Victorian Law Week? Well, Victorian Law Week is a program of community events and activities that's designed to improve the public's understanding of the law and the legal system. At its heart, it's really a program for everyday Victorians. It's there to help them understand their rights, find answers to their questions, and to find out what help is available to them. So Law Week is a national initiative, but it's run separately in each state, and in Victoria, it's managed by the Victorian Law Foundation. While we manage the program, we don't run the events ourselves. Events are run by a whole range of organisations, CLCs, government bodies, community organisations, law firms, the courts, and a whole lot more. And we call those organisations our event partners. So you might hear us using that term from time to time. Now, I just wanted to flag that we talk about events, and we'll be talking about events during the webinar, but that's a really loose term. The activities that we include in the Law Week program go beyond traditional events. In previous years, they certainly have included webinars, information sessions, and sort of panel discussions, but also free legal consultations. We've had info stands at libraries where people could drop past and ask questions and pick up legal resources. There have been informal Q&A sessions on legal topics. We've had interactive quizzes and workshops, both online and in person. They're always popular. Mock trials, film screenings followed by panel discussions, and art exhibitions that have an educative element to them. And of course, we are always open to new ideas for interesting and engaging events. Now I'm going to pass over to Helen, who will let you know about a few key dates and explain the support that's available to event partners.
Thanks, Lisa. So we just wanted to go over some of the key dates that you can add to your calendar and bear in mind as you plan your activities or events for Law Week. So first up, Law Week this year is running from the 17th to the 23rd of May 2021. Law Week grant applications are currently open, and our grants manager Melanie will discuss the grants that are available in a moment, but those grant applications close on the 8th of March, so in a couple of weeks. Law Week event registrations submitted via our online form close on the 26th of March, and we aim to have the final program released online in early to mid-April. So hopefully that gives you a timeline and things to aim for as you move forward. Now, the next thing is talking about the kind of support that the Victoria Law Foundation provides to our event partners, you guys. So first up, just want to say that ultimately we know that event partners are responsible for all aspects of running their events. We recognise that you are the subject matter experts, you know your topic and your audiences best. But we're here to help you make it the most effective event possible. So that's why we're always happy to talk through your event idea and help you develop it. And, you know, you can come to us to discuss things like if you're unsure about how to determine a target audience or how to best reach a target audience. You can discuss with us your event format, if you need help with the event location. And we can also facilitate introductions to organisations you might want to collaborate with or who have further expertise that you might want to draw upon and take advantage of. And as Matt and Jackie will discuss in further detail shortly, we can also support and supplement promotion of your event. Now, as you've seen, we're a really small team and some of us only work part-time. So we just wanted to emphasise that the earlier you can come to us, the better we can support you and the more time we can spend with you. So, Matt?
Thank you very much, Helen. And Hello, I'm Matt Hurst. I'm the Communications Manager here at Victorian Law Foundation, and with me I have Jackie Matthews, and you are looking at the entirety of the communications team for Victoria Law Week. So our role is to promote Law Week as a whole. As Helen mentioned, you are responsible for marketing your own event as you know your audience best, but we also support you and supplement your promotion in a number of ways, and we're just going to run through a couple of them now. So all events are listed on our online program on the website. You can see here how they look just on the program page. We look at grouping events around themes or target audiences and run dedicated promotion for them. So in previous years, we have focused on things such as wills or events for older Australians or events in specific regions. We also hire a publicist who's the excellent Mick Pascos, who works with us to get free media for Law Week. And this can involve promoting specific events if there are media opportunities to promote them. So in those circumstances, he'd work with you to prepare for what the media outlet needs. He generally won't provide free media pitching for every event in our program, but he's available to provide general advice on gaining your own free media. So that's a very big part of being able to get the word out around Law Week. We're also arranging a larger media buy for Law Week this year. We're still working on the specifics, but it will focus on digital promotion and digital programmatic ad spend. So we are exploring some small newspaper ads or out-of-home advertising, but that's all in the works at the moment. And we're also looking at following a content marketing approach this year to draw people in through the relevant and popular topics and themes that affect their everyday life. So we look forward to showing that to you once it's a little bit further progressed. I will now pass over to Jackie, who will run through some other aspects of support we provide.
So in the social space, we promote each event from our event partners on our Twitter page, and we also run paid ads on Facebook. So to create these paid ads, we use the event image that was provided by you when you register your event. So try to find an image that's engaging and eye-catching, because that'll be used in the ads. We also use your specified target audience to target these ads. So this ensures that the ad is getting in front of those that your event is most relevant to. So you'll see in the middle image there that we can go by location, age, gender, languages spoken, even as exact as keywords for like interest groups or industries that they might work in. We can get really precise with these ads. So it's really important to provide as much detail as you can about your target audience. And that's something that Lisa's going to speak to in a moment. And also to support your digital marketing, we'll provide logo files for the new Victorian Law Week logo and a style guide to go along with this as well. And we can also provide standard social media share graphics and template resources that you can use in your promotion. There's an example of one on the right there from last year. If you have any other particular resource that you think would be helpful in your promotion, let us know, because we can, see what we can do about also creating that. Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the start, we are a comms team of 2, so there is a limit on how much we can help, but we would love to hear from you if you have ideas or there are things that you want or need, because if you want or need them, other people might want or need them too, and we'd be happy to look at producing something that is then a resource for everyone. So we will try our best. We will also be providing some guidance around promoting your events, and as Lisa mentioned, we'll be holding that session in April, and we'll be releasing new material via our website over the coming weeks as well. I believe now we will be hearing from our grants manager, Mel, who will speak about the grants that are available. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Mel Raga. I'm the grants manager at the foundation, and I'll briefly provide a summary of the Law Week grants that we can provide. So we have funding for about 4 to 5 Law Week events. Grants up to $2,500 are available. The criteria, events must take place during Law Week. They must be open to a public audience. So you can still target specific groups, but you can't have a closed invitation. They must be open to everyone. And ideally free events. We will prioritise different groups this year, and they are regional audiences and new audience groups. So it might be a new community group that you've identified through your organisation or your service, and trying to get new information or engage with them. In terms of the application process, the application is through Smarty Grants and can be accessed from our website. We encourage you to think about the budget items you need. We will fund project coordination, venue hire, small amounts for catering, printing of resources or materials. And we would ask you to consider, if you're doing an in-person or face-to-face event, having a backup plan, just because it's a bit unknown about how things might go this year with restrictions. So again, how to apply, go to Smarty Grants, the application form is there. If you have any questions about the form, have a grant idea, please give me a call, and my contact details will be at the end of this slide deck. The closing date is 8th of March, which is a public holiday. But we're giving you sort of an extra weekend. That date is, so the Law Week event submission, you'll have time to submit your event through that process. So as I said, please contact me if you have ideas for a grant, and I'd love to chat with about your ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Now we're just going to take you through some things to keep in mind when planning your events. And the first thing we want to take you through is our updated event criteria. So to be accepted into Victorian Law Week program this year, events need to take place within Victoria, improve the Victorian community's understanding of the law and or the legal system, engage with individuals or small businesses, and be free of charge unless you've obtained an exemption from us. Now, this is because we want to ensure that the program is as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So exemptions will only be given in very limited circumstances, but as always, please do talk to us. The other thing we wanted to let you know is that events also need to be open to the public. And what we mean by this is that they can't be invitation only. We don't want to be telling people about events that they are not able to attend. If you're interested in offering free legal consultations, that is fantastic, and we would love to include them in the program. But we just wanted to draw your attention to a few things to bear in mind while you plan those events. So this year we've introduced a new requirement that consultations will need to be at least 40 minutes long to be included in the program. When you're working out the length of the appointments you're prepared to offer, please make sure that you've allowed enough time to obtain instructions and to provide meaningful preliminary information or advice during that appointment. And in order to do that, you might want to set some parameters around what can be covered during the appointment, just to make it more manageable and to set reasonable expectations. For example, last year we had a law firm that did offer free consultations. They practiced in wills and estates, but rather than offering to provide advice on wills and estate planning matters, they instead asked people to bring in an existing will or power of attorney and offered to simply review and provide advice on what needed updating. So it's worthwhile considering whether you want to be a bit prescriptive about what you can provide. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Helen. Now, if you want to run a really effective Victorian Law Week event, it's important to consider the purpose and the target audience of your event from the outset. Now, those two elements are really intrinsically linked, and they need to be factored into all aspects of your event planning and delivery. When you're thinking about the purpose of your event, what you're really asking is, why are you running the event? Now, That sounds like a really simple, basic question, but it can sometimes require a bit of thought to answer it properly. Now, we recognise that you might be using Law Week as a vehicle for achieving your organisation's own goals. But when you're identifying the purpose of your event, we really do encourage you to think beyond any business development goals or any internal community engagement KPIs that you might have, and ask, what do you want attendees to get out of the event? Now, if you do run an effective event, of course, that can lead to new clients, new referral sources, but we really do encourage you to think beyond business development as your primary purpose. So what if you want to get involved in Law Week, but you don't know where to start? You don't know what would be useful for you to cover? Well, a great place for you to start is with your organisation's own data. It can provide a whole lot of really valuable information. For example, one thing your data might show is that there are recurring issues amongst certain stakeholder groups. This is a screenshot of an event that was run by PEXA, the Property Exchange Australia, and they ran that for last year's Law Week. Now, in the lead up to Law Week, they identified an issue with cyber fraud in property transactions. So basically, emails containing bank details for property settlements were being intercepted and hackers were stealing the proceeds of sale. While they'd put in place a whole lot of protections and had been in contact with practitioners about the new systems they should be using, they recognised that might not be enough to stop the problem altogether, and that consumers, the buyers and sellers themselves, needed to know about the issue and how to protect themselves. So the primary purpose of their event was to raise consumers' awareness about fraud and how to protect themselves. That subject matter formed part of a much broader event on tips for buying and selling property, because they recognised that would be the best way to introduce that content to their target audience. Now, another way you might work out how to focus your event is to have a look at the demographics of your local community and the issues that different groups in the community might face. So this is a photo of an event that was run by Northern Community Legal Centre in pre-COVID times. They looked at their community and recognised that there were a whole lot of recently arrived migrants who might not understand their legal rights and the services that were available to them. And they really wanted to run an event to address that. So they held an event at a local English language school, and they conducted legal health checks. And they're basically surveys that ask about a whole range of issues that a person might face in their life, so that they can identify if the people have any legal problems and then let them know about their rights and the services available to help them. Another thing to think about is that people are often likely to have particular legal needs during particular life stages. So you might want to have a look at the makeup of your local community or of a particular community, and consider the legal needs or legal problems that people are likely to have. This photo is of an event that was run a couple of years ago, also clearly pre-COVID, and it was run by Tullamarine Community House in conjunction with a local lawyer. So there was a seniors group that met regularly at the community house, and the organisers recognised that that was a group that needed to know about future planning, but that they might not be particularly comfortable with legal matters and would be pretty unlikely to go and see a lawyer off their own bat. So the purpose of the event was to educate the seniors about powers of attorney. They ran a really informal, really accessible event for local seniors. It was essentially a Q&A about powers of attorney where people could ask any questions that they had. It was held at the community house. It was a location that was really familiar to the audience, so it was not intimidating at all. And there was morning tea provided, and really catering, free food and drink is always a fantastic draw card. Now, you might run an event that's designed to address an existing legal need or legal issue, or you might want to teach your target audience about a new development. So there might be broader social issues or current events that give rise to particular legal needs and that you can tie into. So last year in the lead up to Law Week, there were a whole raft of legal issues emerging due to COVID, as you would all know. So we had people dealing with employment issues in really large numbers. There were new tenancy laws, the new laws around emergency powers, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. So we had a whole lot of organisations run webinars on these topics, designed to let people know about the new laws that affected them, what their rights and their responsibilities were, and also importantly, where they could go to get help. So it might be worthwhile thinking about whether there are emerging legal issues in the context of broader events that you could tie into. For example, we all know JobKeeper is coming to an end, and the vaccine's being rolled out. That might give rise to particular employment law issues or other legal issues. If you work for a complaints body or other legal institution, your purpose might be to raise awareness of what you do. And we'll talk about how you can do that a bit later in the context of our discussion about target audience. Okay, so turning now to target audience. The audience for Victorian Law Week as a whole is extremely broad. It's the Victorian community. But under that really broad umbrella audience, we encourage event organisers to set specific target audiences for their own event. And the reason for that is that your event will be more effective and it will have much greater impact if you have a specific target audience, and also if you factor them into every element of your event planning. So if your event is covering substantive law, you'll have the most impact and better engagement if you're delivering that information directly to a group that needs to know it, or at the very least is interested in it. If you're trying to raise awareness generally about your organisation and the work it does, it really does help to think about who needs to know about your organisation and also why they would want to come along to the event as well. It can actually be really difficult to attract an audience to a general awareness raising event. And if you have a target audience, that means you can design your event and market your event in such a way so that you draw in a particular group. That's not to say you won't also get others attending also, as well. I'll give you an example from last year. So the Coroner's Court and the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine wanted to run an online event to raise awareness about the work of their organisations. But rather than a simple panel discussion, they ran a mock inquest into Prince's death. So in doing that, that allowed them to position their target audience as Prince fans. That was a really subtle way to target their event to a particular age demographic. And it also gave them the opportunity to engage in targeted marketing that appealed to that audience, and also to deliver the event using language and content that would appeal to their audience while still getting their message across. And that was a really successful strategy. They had a very large audience and they were fully booked well in advance of the event. So if you have a target audience and you factor them into every element of your event, what that means is that you'll be delivering the right information to the right people in the right way. Now, the information you're sharing might well be relevant to a whole lot of different people. But if you want to communicate that information effectively, you need to do it in a way that's appropriate, that's relevant and useful for your particular audience. And unfortunately, it's just not possible to speak to everyone effectively in the same way. You certainly wouldn't be able to speak to these two people effectively if you spoke to them in the same way. Really, what it comes down to is that if you try to speak to everyone, you'll end up speaking to almost no one. And I'll just give you another example. So say you're a wills and estates lawyer. You want to run a webinar about future planning for anyone who doesn't have a will. Now, there are going to be a whole lot of people who fall into that category. For example, that content might be of particular interest and relevance to both retirees and to parents of young kids who are just starting to think about future planning. But there are going to be huge differences in the information that each of those groups needs to know and or is even interested in. Also, in the language you use to get that information across effectively. The best event format for each group is likely to be quite different. Online events might be better for young parents, and retirees might not necessarily be as computer literate, so that wouldn't suit them as well. How you effectively market the event to each of those groups is also likely to be very different. And even the most convenient location and time of day for your event will be totally different. So older people might prefer an event during the day, but for young parents, a time after the kids have gone to bed is likely to suit them better. Now, what are some things you might take into consideration when you're working out who your target audience should be? Well, to start with, you might ask yourself, who needs to know the information you are sharing and who will be interested in attending your event? And they're really the two key questions. Now, beyond that, you might want to think about whether to narrow down your audience by a few different factors: by location, by their age, their occupation, whether they're at a particular life stage. For example, are they university students? Are they young parents, empty nesters, retirees? So, for example, you might decide to run an event that's designed to raise awareness amongst tertiary students about how to challenge unjust public transport fines. But you might look at a combination of these factors as well. So you might run an event to encourage older people in the Vermont area to undertake future planning, for example. Now, if you're covering substantive law, you might also want to think about whether it would be more effective to target your event directly to the people who have a particular legal issue, or if those people are joined up with other services, would it be more effective to target your event to the service providers? So to healthcare workers, social workers, community workers, or the like. For example, you might want to run an event on how to identify elder abuse and what to do about it that's designed for managers and staff at private aged care homes in a particular region, rather than designing that event for the residents themselves. Now, once you've decided on your target audience, we recommend that you take them into account in all aspects of your event planning. But what exactly do we mean by that? So what should be tailored to your target audience? Well, the first and the most obvious thing is the content that you cover. Your event should cover the information that your target audience needs to know or is interested in. It's also a really good idea to use language that your target audience understands so that the information that you communicate, it's really easy for them to comprehend. So it's worthwhile thinking carefully about the language you use in a few different contexts. In how you word your event title, in the event description on the Victorian Law Week website and in any marketing materials you produce, how you draft any resources that you give out at your event or that you send out to your attendees afterwards. And of course, the language that's used by those people who are going to be talking directly to your audience. So any speakers at your event, lawyers who are providing consultations, or people staffing information stands. Now, there's a bit of a qualifier here. I don't mean to say that if your event, for example, is targeted to young people, you need to start throwing around words like woke and lit. I mean, you can hear how ridiculous that sounds coming out of my mouth, so please don't do that. But just make sure that the language you're using is language that your specific audience will be able to understand really easily. If you look at a term like elder abuse, it might be that aged care workers know what that means, so it would be absolutely appropriate to use if you were running an event that was designed for them. But older people themselves might not understand that term at all, and so if that's your target audience, you should think about using some different terminology. Another thing to be aware of is that it's really easy to assume that language you use every day in your work is generally understood by people in the wider community. But what we've learnt through experience is that even a term like family law, that's actually an industry term. And again, while that might be fine to use for some audiences, for others, words like divorce or relationship breakdown, or even split up with your partner, something as simple as that, might be much easier for them to understand. I think a really helpful way to think about it is to ask, what words would my target audience type into Google if they were looking for information about this topic? You should also consider your target audience when deciding where your event will be held. So it's much easier to engage your audience if you go to where they are, rather than expecting them to come to you. Now, Matt and Helen are going to go into some more detail about in-person versus online events in just a moment, but I just wanted to flag a couple of things at this stage. If you're running an in-person event, we've found that the most effective events are those that are held at locations that are convenient for their target audience and locations that they already use. So not only are those places much easier for your audience to get to, they're really familiar, and so they're not intimidating. We found, for example, that libraries are really accessible for most people and are really great for engaging with groups who already use the space. So if you're wanting to run an event for older people and you know for example, there's a group of seniors that meets there quite regularly, chat to the library and see if you can hold your event during the meeting or before it or after it when those people are already in the space. It's also worth keeping in mind that many people are actually really intimidated by corporate offices. So they might be put off by an event that's held in a law firm's boardroom, for example. But again, it really depends who your target audience is. That might not be the case if you want to engage with professionals, for example. For online events, think about whether your target audience is computer literate and also whether they have reliable access to the internet. Also have a think about the platforms that they're comfortable using. I'll give you just a quick example from last year's Law Week. So Goulburn Valley Libraries ran a series of online events that were designed for their local community. Now they knew that their regular library users, those people that they really wanted to engage, they were not very computer literate, but many of them had attended the library's Facebook training session and they were pretty comfortable using Facebook. So they decided to live stream their events via their Facebook account rather than using Zoom or another platform. You should also think about the date and time that would suit your audience best. As I mentioned earlier, older people might prefer an event during the day, while after hours might be better for people with kids or working professionals. And if you're thinking of running an event for school kids, you'll probably want to run that during school hours. It's also a good idea to choose an event format that will appeal to your target audience. So have a think about how they consume information. I know a lot of people here were wanting some guidance about the best type of event to run, but really it's going to depend on your particular audience, who they are, and what the purpose of your event is, so what you're hoping to achieve. So please get in touch with us if you'd like some help working out the most effective type of event to run. And finally, when setting your target audience, it's also important to consider if you have a way to reach them. As we've mentioned a few times, we're running a session in April about how to effectively market your event. But it's something that's worthwhile turning your mind to at this early stage. So I'm now going to hand over to Matt and Helen to talk about some of the things you need to think about when deciding whether to run an online or an in-person event.
Thank you very much, Lisa. First, I'll say that while we recognise that not all events are suitable to be run online, for those considering it, we've found a number of benefits, and a lot of these sort of were reflected from Law Week last year. The first is you can reach more people. So this is something that we really experienced last year, particularly if your topic is a universal topic across the state. We don't have those geographic limits that we used to have of needing people to arrive at this specific location in person. So we received a real large boost in reach from our events last year. It's very cost effective and logistically simple, and that's for both you and the attendees. So less suppliers to deal with, and again, much simpler for your attendees to arrive at your event. Considering the current environment around COVID-19 restrictions, it's much more predictable. So you can proceed with certainty, and you don't necessarily need a backup plan in place. It's very easy to collaborate. So, you know, do you want a guest speaker from overseas? That's not a problem at all. And that's something that we've done recently through a few of our research-related events that we've run. For sensitive issues and sensitive topics, online events can offer a level of privacy and anonymity in a way that can be a lot trickier to handle in person. So that includes providing options for people to ask questions anonymously or to log in and not be seen to be coming to an event at a particular place. And the event itself can also have a lasting value beyond the day. So this is something that you can record, stick it online and share, and suddenly you've got an event that has impact beyond the 1 hour on that particular day. And that ongoing benefit was something we really saw from Law Week events last year. While we see a lot of benefits, there are a few considerations to keep in mind. So if you're new to the technology, you may need to spend a little bit of time choosing the right platforms and learning the tech. A lot of platforms that are available are quite intuitive, but it does pay to practice, and it can be a bit of a process making sure you feel comfortable using it. And it's also very important to have a clear idea of the purpose of your event and the experience that you'd like your attendees to have. So how will they interact with you? What would you like them to be able to see and do to get the most out of that particular experience? And that's something that you can lose a little bit with online events, in that level of interactivity changes. Accessibility is also a consideration, because online events aren't necessarily accessible to everyone, and that'll be very dependent on your target audience and your subject matter itself. From some of the personal experience at the foundation, as of this time last year, we basically run 0 online events. We've now run quite a few, and from running more and more events, we have learnt many lessons about what works and what doesn't work for us, and what works and doesn't work for the different types of events that we do run. So we would be more than happy to talk with you about our experiences and how that may translate for you. That goes from just some advice on the platforms that we've used and that we looked at, through to how to actually manage the event on the day, and those few tips and tricks that just means you don't have to devise your own system from scratch. So if you're completely new to online events and you know roughly what you want to do, please get in touch. We can see what advice that we can provide that will work for you. I will now hand over to Helen to talk a little bit more about in-person events.
Thank you. So if after all that you're interested in running an in-person event, there's just a few things to bear in mind. First and foremost, I guess, is you need to be mindful of the latest COVID-safe government guidelines. And it is a really good idea these days to have a backup plan in case the rules around public gatherings change. And we've seen that things can change very quickly. Also, please keep in mind the accessibility of your venue. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, factor in some catering if you can and if budget allows, because it is a fantastic draw card to people for in-person events. And we're also happy to support you with any other event logistics. Just get in touch if there's something that you need around an in-person event. We're happy to share our knowledge. And yeah, Lisa.
Thanks, Helen. That brings us to the end of the webinar today. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really hope you'll all consider participating in Victorian Law Week this year. As we have said a number of times today, please do get in touch with us if you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss your event ideas. Our contact details are on the screen. We also have some resources on the Victorian Law Week website that go over some of the content that we've discussed today, and more will be added in the lead up to Victorian Law Week. So please do check them out. If you're ready to go with your event, our registrations are open and you can submit your event via our website. Thank you all again very much for joining us, and have a great day.